Welcome to My Therapist Says, an interactive experience enriching your most important life relationships. This evening I'll be your moderator as we look at a very important topic, the topic of something special under the Christmas tree, the gift of play. Both adults and children alike really enjoy and really should be a part of their life, and that's the idea of play. This evening we are pleased to have Dr. Terry Davis with us. She has 2 earned master's degrees and also a doctorate from Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. She's also an addictions counselor, and again, she's a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California under the Board of Behavioral Sciences. As we look at this topic this evening, and those of you who are listening in live streaming or listening later to this, we are offering practical biblical solutions, hoping it's like having your own Christian doctor in your living room. I hope that this evening you will sit back, relax, and take in these life-changing insights. Please join me as we connect with a live audience and My Therapist Says. Welcome again to My Therapist Says, and we just want to welcome you on this cold evening. As you have seen here in San Diego, California, we don't normally go, 30 or 40 degrees in one day, but we have been doing that. I used to live in Kansas where it would change sometimes 70 degrees in one day. But here in San Diego, we've had some cold weather in the last few days. But we're so glad that you're here, and I want to welcome Dr. Terry Davis, who has been on this platform before, who has incredible credentials, is a licensed clinical social worker. We happen to be colleagues at the Center for Enriching Relationships. I had the privilege of hiring her, and she has a lot of background as a principal. I think I mentioned this, the principal as well as a teacher, and has taught at the university level and helping parents work with their children and really understands the whole art of play. And that's what we're going to work on this evening. So would you join me in welcoming to our platform Dr. Terry Davis. Terry, thank you. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. Thank you for having me. I don't know where, hello, testing? I'm not sure we have, there we go. Now so I was saying thank you, Dr. Welch, for asking me once again, and thank you all for joining us this evening in the dark. I know it's getting dark earlier here, so thank you. I am very privileged to be here tonight, and my husband's accompanied me too, so thank you, honey, for joining us tonight. I'm thrilled to get to talk with you tonight and have a discussion about play. And I do believe it is a gift of play under your Christmas tree, so the topic is quite timely this time of year. So with that, I'm going to launch right into my presentation. I would like for you to think about what it is that you, when you first saw Santa Claus. And I know where the slides are coming up, but I want you to think about what it is that you asked Santa the last time you sat on his lap. Just go back to that thought for just a minute, and I'll give you just a second to kind of process that and remember that. For some of us, it's a little longer than others, right? But thinking about what was it you asked for Santa? And was it something that, for the purposes of our event this evening, something tangible? Because I'm going to lead us into talking about toys and play and games. And so thinking about something that is really special to you, some play. Okay, you got that? Got that? Now, with this next slide, I was able to go back into the archives and find Dr. Welch as a child. Please look at him here now. This is a stock photo, but I can certainly think of you doing that as a child under your Christmas tree. And so I'm thinking about that in terms of how we want to really think about play and think about the gift that we have at Christmas time, and looking at how it is that we really enjoy each other and how we work together. There are so many things that play accomplishes in our lives, and I'm going to walk through some of those things. I'm wondering if the slides, is there one that shows the next one coming with my notes on it? If not, that's okay. It might be a different setup, but I was looking for that. So the definition of play is to do something in a way that is not serious. So just as you were talking about what you were talking with couples about, doing something that's fun, laughing, something that's just not serious. If you'll go to the next slide, it's something that is actually very essential for human growth and development. It's something that's essential for cultivating relationships and learning. So that's very important in terms of how we grow and develop. It's a very natural process. We learn through play. Children learn through play, but adults learn through play as well. We learn about each other. We do a lot of things like build trust. We regulate. We were in a play setting. We regulate our emotions. We learn how to manage our anxieties. When someone is playing a game, and if you go back to that, the thought about a game that you played as a child, or that game that you wanted from Santa so much, what is it that you really enjoyed about that? And what is it that you learned from that particular toy that you got? And on that note, I want to share with you one of my very special toys from my childhood. Thinking about sitting on Santa's lap, and I asked for this very special gift, and I'm going to open it up for you. Here she is. This is my Chetty Cathy. Yes, this is the original 1960-something Chetty Cathy. Anybody recognize this doll or something like it? This was something that I loved, that I wanted from Santa Claus, and I learned through playing with her that I actually wanted to be a teacher. I would line up all my dolls, and I would instruct them, and I would tell them what to do. And my mother would always say, "Yep, you came out of the womb telling people what to do," and that's partially true. And I learned through play my love for teaching, and I'm continuing to do that today as I continue to educate clients. And so much of what I do in therapy is teaching. So, is there a favorite toy that you think about when you thought about sitting on Santa's lap that was just something that you really wanted from Santa?
Yes, it was actually my wagon that I was able to receive. It was red wagon with the wonderful wheels that we all see from 300 years ago.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yes.
Yeah, one of those beautiful red wagons. That's wonderful. And I can imagine you playing with that red wagon and having a lot of social development and hanging out in the neighborhood and working with your now colleagues, where you learned a lot with your own emotional development playing in that wagon.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Well, so as you work with play, as you think about play as it being a natural process, some of the other things it does, it helps with problem solving. It helps one develop creative thinking. It certainly encourages open communication so that you're talking to each other and interacting. It builds self-esteem in our children. It elevates our spirit. So just as Dr. Welch mentioned in the opening, being able to interact and play with another human being is such a natural process. It's something that is so important to our spirit. We're going to advance the slide to the next one. I don't see what's coming. So children actually communicate through play. Our children don't, especially very young children, they don't have language. Would you like to hold my doll?
Sure, I'll be happy
Find a place for her.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, that's lovely.
Will she chat as I'm talking here?
You
or
know,
I'm
she
sitting?
will not. She's
Okay.
she's long lost that ability.
Okay.
As you think of a young child, they many times, especially very young, don't have words to communicate. So their only form of communication is through play. It's through that interaction. And it's the way that they make sense of the world around them. And they express their thoughts, how they feel, and how they believe through how they play. What I'd like to take us into just for a minute, back to maybe your Psych 101 days or back to high school, and think about Piaget in play. Piaget talked about how children progress through the stages of development, and the first stage, you picture the child in the crib looking up at the mobile in that very early sensory motor stage, and they're connecting with something. They're connecting with an object. That's the very, very early form of play, right? And then especially the 2 through 6, 7-year-old stage, more the pre-operational stage, where they start to develop recognition of symbols. And so in the photo there, you have the little boy playing doctor. His little teddy bear is his patient. So developing that symbolic play. And then, of course, we move into concrete operational, and we won't go into the weeds there. But the idea is that children are not just idly doing something that's not important in their lives. They're growing in many ways through how they play. And so children act out situations in play that are disturbing to them, that have confused them, and they find ways that they can think through and process using toys, using people, using play through where they are able to start to heal themselves through that experience. Does that make sense at all to the audience? Is that kind of a foreign concept? So this lovely family, as you picture them, they have a board game in front of them, and they are able to do some of those things in that previous list. You can imagine them learning to communicate with each other, learning to be able to maybe regulate their emotions as they are unhappy because someone lost, and so being able to deal with anxieties there. They're looking at each other and doing some things that are fun, and hopefully they're laughing and they're getting that belly laugh that you talked about early on and getting the oxygen into their system. I'd like for you to think for a moment of the tradition that you have in your family. What are some games that you might play, or some things that you might play during the Christmas season? I know in our family, we're big 42 players. And so any 42 players out there, we will come and play with you. We'll play with you. We'll take you on. We love 42, and it's just a tradition that you think about the games that you might have as a tradition in your family, how they bond you, how they cause you to laugh, how they do some things in terms of helping your brain fire and be really happy. And so that seems really simple, but doing those types of games are certainly really more than just playing a game for no reason. It's a big purpose that it serves. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you this evening, I'm going to kind of sprinkle in some games throughout the program. This game is called Go Fish. And I made this game with a simple deck of cards. And you can see on the screen that instead of an ace, it's an angry ace. And so the 2 is a terrible 2. The 3 is a thankful 3. So the idea is that you play this just like you play Go Fish. You have the child or the youngest member of the family kind of lead the game, and you deal the cards out, and then you are able to talk about, do you have a thankful 3? And so when you get 4 of a kind, you lay it down. You're going to go fish. You talk about when were you thankful, or if you have, one of them is excited 8. When was it? Talk about a time when you were excited. And so as a part of the game, you're having that kind of conversation. This is something that I do with my clients in therapy, and it works beautifully for a family session. And children love this game. They just love it. So if you would like to create that game for yourself, you can Google emotion faces, emotion icons, and Amazing Google will pull up just what you need, and you can get that sheet that I had on the screen. So this idea of play is where we enter into the world of a child. and entering into the place where their minds, their hearts, and their souls meet. The person that made this statement, this quote, is Virginia Axline. I'll be talking about her further along in the program, but she was a student of Carl Rogers. And so she's also considered the mother of play therapy. Another game that I wanted to share with you is Kerplunk. So this particular game, anyone ever heard of Kerplunk or played Kerplunk? Oh, we have some Kerplunk players here in the house. So the idea of this game, if you'll move to the next slide, it will show some different cards that you might play as a part of playing Kerplunk. So I wanted to, let me see if I can squint a little bit and see this. So the idea that when you pull the stick out and the marbles fall, the idea, like number 2, we all hate to lose, so sometimes we cheat in order to win at a game. So how does it feel when how do you handle cheating, or how does it feel when someone cheats in a game with you? So there are 8 cards that are on your handout, and those are things that you can duplicate and use as cards if you were going to play that game, say with kids or grandkids or cousins at Christmas time, during the holiday season, during vacation season, where you might be able to have a conversation about, how are you feeling about this, and really, how sometimes when you ask a child, how's it going, how's school, and what are you going to get? Fine. Mm-hmm. So asking more interesting, detailed questions to kind of get into their mind a little bit and get them engaged with you, and especially in a game. I'll, as an aside for a moment, if I'm ever with especially a teenager, and sometimes teenagers are a little challenged to have a conversation. And so my experience has been, if they have something in their hand, if they're drawing or writing or doodling or even those adult coloring sheets, things like that are things that are very helpful to help engage someone in conversation. So you're welcome to use that trick over Christmas if you have an adolescent you want to talk with. So play therapy. Play therapy is actually a specialized field of play. Many therapists now are using something called play-based activities. And if there are any students or academians in the house, I actually brought a journal article that I'll leave up here that you can pick up afterwards. But the idea of play therapy, the definition being that it's the use of toys, drawings, or other activities to facilitate that therapeutic process with children, and it's known collectively as play therapy, using blocks, toys. I have some other things in the presentation you'll see about those. It's inherently a therapeutic activity for children, so it's just very natural. There's kind of a theme here. The purpose is to express thoughts, express wishes and feelings, and children use the experience of play to have in a variety of situations where they can use their imagination, and it's also very strategic. And I wanted to highlight one thing: it is not exclusively utilized with children. When I have worked in addiction, one of the things that I would utilize is sand tray. If you can imagine like a baking sheet that you would bake a cake in, and filling that with sand, and I would have a client draw a line in the middle of it, and then on the left side, maybe using different miniature toys, would be able to but actually picture and put in the sand the toys of what their life was like before they were in addiction. And then on the right side, depending on where we were in the process of therapy, talk about what their life is going to be in the future. So that distinction there, and even as adults, sometimes it's hard to come up with the words. And I have just been amazed at how almost magical play can be, and how it really taps into our unconscious mind. I'm going to go into that just a little bit further. A therapist's responsibility is to go to a child's level and communicate with them through the use of the medium that they are the most comfortable with. And in a few slides over, I'm going to show you a play therapy room. We'll look at that. The original person that used play was our friend Freud. Can you believe it? 1909. He used it with little Hans, who was a 5-year-old that had a fear of horses. And I won't go into the details of that. We don't have time today, but that was the original use of play therapy. And he did a lot of communication in writing, in letters, with little Hans' father. From there, Klein in 1932 really started talking about how we bring the unconscious to the conscious, using play as that very vehicle. And then Levy, not your friend Dr. Levy, but another Dr. Levy, utilized a structured approach whereby children engage in free play. They become very comfortable in the playroom, and they are actually the ones directing the play. And so I think in the next slide, on the left, you have a playroom that is really integrated into a therapy room. This is more like my office in our Rancho Bernardo CER Center, where you see the dollhouse on the left side, you see the shelf of toys and miniatures, and then on the right, you see a full-blown playroom. And you have the different, these are some of the slides from my own toy collection. So on the left, you have, if you kind of turn sideways to see that, you have domestic animals. So these are horses, ducks, rabbits, dogs. And then in the center, you have military people. I think they're mostly military men, Army men. And then you have, on the far right, you have more wild animals, the tigers. And so in a structured play setting, you would present different types of toys to children, and they get to choose. And as you're in I recall a situation when I worked in a psych hospital years ago in the outpatient clinic, and I was working. I'd set up a play therapy room. Was working with a kiddo, and he, as the therapist, and even as a parent in the playroom, you become another toy. And I ended up being a basketball goal. So here I was, and he was directing all of that. And even as I talk to you about it, it just almost gives me chills, because it's amazing how in the mind of a child they can, when they're given the opportunity to play and given the permission to explore and do some things that maybe in other areas of their life they never have that chance to do. And so in a playroom, you have real-life toys. You have a baby bottle, baby dolls, animal families, cars, a medical kit. You have acting out aggressive, scary toys. You can just imagine how someone who has been traumatized would want to use possibly scarier toys to talk about through the toys what their traumatic experiences have been. And then you have toys that are for creative expression and help children release their emotions. So sand, water, musical instruments, dress-up clothes. And one of my favorites, and one of the favorites in my office, let's see, here it is, the magic wand. This is, it lights up.
There we go.
So this is, as you can probably imagine, very popular. So
may I hold it? No, I'm just kidding.
With Chetty Cat, you're going to have your hands full
I know,
there.
I've got my hands full. I'm ready to play.
So, dollar store, by the way. And so having toys available to children and adolescents as well. Toys that are attention-grabbing, like the magic wand. These toys provide wonderful opportunities to help them develop self-control. They provide an expression of a wide range of their feelings and help them provide their own self-understanding. I'm thinking back to a client that I've seen before that had some traumatic experiences, and I was using a dollhouse with her and screaming at the top of her lungs. And so that was a lot of self-expression she was getting out, that she had not had the opportunity in any other setting really to do that. I guess there hadn't really been a safe place for her to scream at the top of her lungs. And so something triggered her in a good way in how she was interacting with toys and dolls. And that was the way. And then she was able to calm down. And so it was, again, just kind of an amazing thing that was taking place. So I'd like to talk with you a little bit about sand trays. So the use of those different figurines that I showed you, you have ways that children are able to, in a safe place, start to create and express themselves through use of a sand tray. Look really closely at this one. Do you see there's a little guy in the very center of the screen of the picture, and he has his head in the sand. He's facing the ground. This, I'm assuming, was probably a divorce situation, or maybe he was being bullied at school. But just look at that for a minute. You see how through the use of these figurines in the sand, they can express how they're feeling. This particular sand tray, it's the same tray on the left and the right, but if you'll look really closely, you have a family of people. So you have the yellow person is the baby of the family. You have a sea creature that's the second from the left, and you have mom that's blue and dad that's green. And I'd like for you to look closely. Well, for one thing, the sea creature is my client. And so this child is clearly feeling something that he's not the same as the rest of the family, or at least at this point in his life right now. And if you'll go back to that slide one more time, I'm sorry. And if you look at the baby has a sheep above it. The child has an army person above. And this was totally directed by the child. I didn't do anything but engage him in conversation. I didn't ask him, he or she. I'm using she and he back and forth to keep her identity safe. But if you look at the parents, there's a Superman above both of the parents. So thinking about that, his parents are his hero. And then in the right side slide, you see where, if you look really closely, everything is covered up with sand. So something's going on with the family, right? And he's expressing it in this way. And so I'm getting chills just describing this to you, because it's just really almost hard to describe how powerful it is whenever a child is expressing themselves in this way and being able to really to get their feelings out. It's really it's very magical and very powerful. Now you can advance to the next slide. This one, I'm not sure what's going on with the army men, and all the wild animals are lined up, and there's some battle happening, and so some conflict in the family, and how it's being expressed in this particular sand tray. So what I'd like to do is give you a suggestion. Since we are in San Diego, California, and we have the beach right over here, there's lots of sand there. And so if you wanted to, not that you would be being a play therapist, but if you want to encourage expression in your own family, to be able to go to the beach and block off a little in maybe 2x3 area, and bring in some miniature toys, bring in some things. This is just one idea. And to be able to, every person in the family, be able to contribute something to the sand, to the family sand tray. And that is going to produce quite a conversation. And you may be able to get some things out of your adolescence that you're going to observe in the sand that you may not have been able to get from just talking to them, if that makes sense. So continuing on with some of the play theories, relationship play, Taft and Allen, they talked about focusing on present relationships as being very important. And we've mentioned Levy before, the idea that using play to reenact stressful situations helps to bring about that release of those really troubling emotions. So in this next slide, this is one of my favorite books that I highly recommend. It's called The Connected Child. It's by Dr. Karen Purvis. Excuse me. Dr. Purvis is now deceased, but she was a professor at at North Texas University. I'm sorry, at Texas Christian University, and she's worked with people who were in prison that didn't attach as children, So we could talk about attachment theory for a whole nother session, right? But the idea of working with children from hard places, and this was her research is on working with foster children and children that come from other countries and are adopted. And so the reason I brought this into the setting today is the importance of building relationships and nurturing those relationships. And her work is very again, I highly recommend it. And it's something that one of the ideas that I remember from her book, she talks about, well, let me back up a second. The Empowered to Connect website, empoweredtoconnect.org, it's actually a Christian parenting program. And so she talks about ways, there's an entire curriculum, she talks about ways to help parents connect with children and children from hard places and things that you do differently. But a lot of her work is certainly translatable to children that are not from hard places, that are just having a hard time. So I really like her work again. And one of the things that I wanted to share about her work is that she it's very popular in schools to have when a child gets in trouble, and even in homes. And one strategy is to put them in timeout. And she talks about, and her research bears out, that that is not the best approach. That a better approach would be to have a time in. And because a child that is already feeling isolated and feeling unhappy and feeling abandoned in some cases, especially if they've been adopted or gone through the foster system, to put them in a place where they're further being isolated is quite detrimental. And so to bring them in to time in and say, hey, buddy, what's going on? Let's talk about what just happened. And so I really like that approach. So building relationships, that's, of course, very, very key. So since it's Christmas time, I just had to bring in the idea with emotion cookies. So I know a lot of us make cookies at Christmas time. I have actually done this in group therapy before, where bring in different types of icing and have a child, I have the Halloween cookies there, do an emotion cookie. What are you feeling? And talk about, oh, you drew, that looks like a really sad face that you drew on your cookie. Where's that? Tell me more about that. Where's that coming from? So this is the kind of dialogue you could have in your kitchen, right? But another approach, too, would be using the different colors of icing and then engaging, again, building that relationship, engaging children in. So what does the red make you feel as you look at the red that you put on your cookie? Or what does the blue or the white, what does that make you feel like when you think of that white icing? So just another kind of game, another kind of thing to play around your kitchen table. So I have this cute little book called Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And while our time doesn't allow us to read the whole book, I would love to share the whole book with you. But basically, the idea is that it's a good way to talk to kids about treating each other nicely. And in fact, talking to adults about how to fill your bucket. And every day, everybody's carrying around an invisible bucket. And so, as you can probably tell how this book is going to go. Your grandparents, your friends, your neighbors, they all have a bucket. So how do you fill the bucket? So you need other people to fill your bucket, and other people need to fill theirs. You can fill your own bucket too. So how do you fill a bucket? And so it talks about ways to do that. And so the little girl holding an umbrella for someone, picking flowers. So this is a great little book to use with kids in order to help them understand. Not to bully, things to do that you can make a difference with your friends that are having a bad day, and filling each other's buckets and making each other feel happy. And that's something that we should all be doing, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of following the approach of some of the play theories, going back to that, I mentioned Carl Rogers, a Rogerian. That's a very huge psychological theory. And the idea is that it's more of a non-directed therapy. It's also referred to as person-centered therapy. And his student was Virginia Axline, who is considered the mother of play therapy. So to kind of close that close that cycle. So Virginia Axline has 8 principles, and these would be more for therapists. They would develop in the context of working with children through play therapy, develop that warm and friendly relationship, accept the child as they are, tune in to a child's feelings and reflect those back to a child, respect the child's ability to solve problems, not attempting to rush them, and then set only those limits that help the child stay anchored to reality. So those are some things that I can see would be really translatable to a parent-child relationship as well, being able to accept the child where they are and having that warm relationship with them, right? And so this is a dollhouse this is actually my Peppa Pig dollhouse. And working in play and play therapy with dolls, having all kinds of different figurines and animals. There's a picture on the next slide up there that talks about what that is. But different types of games to play. I'm sorry, I prompt you to go to the next slide, then I'm jumping back to the last one. Those are the figurines that you might use in the dollhouse. There's all types of different ones there. But in terms of games, having a dollhouse to play with, but also playing with puppets, playing dance and movement. Music is very powerful. Board games, as we talked about early on. What do you want to be when you grow up? So things that engage each other. So, and then again, the figurines. There's a mermaid there that's very popular. The colored stick people, the purple, the blue mom, the angel. So all of those things, it's amazing how children will gravitate to whatever it is that they really need. And so one of the things that I mentioned earlier from Axline's work, Gary Landreth, who is now the founder and director of the Center for Play Therapy at the University of North Texas, he expanded on her work and was able to continually focus on children and making play therapy child-centered, which is very important. And as I mentioned before, in a play therapy structure, and many times the therapist or a parent in the room just becomes the toy in the room and not directive at all, because you want the child to be able to do what they need to do and process. Other types of non-directed play therapy that you could certainly do in your own home: watercolor, the sand tray, coloring, finger painting, Play-Doh, making collages. I'm aware that there are glitter crayons. I now own some glitter crayons. There are all kinds of amazing things going on in the world of art. I am going to pull out one of my favorite markers as we continue through the slides, if I can put my finger on it. Well, I may not can grab it. We'll look for it later. But there are markers that have a brush on the end of them, and those markers were used in this next slide. I'd like to go back one slide to the left. The structure of this, let me set the groundwork, because this is a pretty powerful story. Brown paper on the table, a family session, and trying to get the youngest child, little child, to be able to process something that's happened. And so I was not directive at all. We were just talking and coloring using the markers, and one of the parents drew this very detailed picture of their home. And then you see on the left of the home what appears to be fire. So the little one drew with the red crayon, the red marker, drew the fire there. And so this family did not have a fire in their home. Something happened where they had to leave their home, and an ambulance came and the fire truck came. And so for a little child, 3 years old, that's pretty traumatic, that a fire truck comes and the ambulance comes and takes a parent away. And so she, in processing this, and for confidentiality reasons, I can't tell you a lot of the details, but the point of the story is that she was able to, for her, she started drawing the fire on her home. And so it helped the family understand that she was so traumatized by that experience. And they had not really thought about that before. They knew we were dealing with a lot of things, but to be able to go back to, she was seriously traumatized by that. And so again, a very powerful session. And so the markers, using different textures, chalk, colored chalk, different kinds of medium, and allow a child to choose is a powerful way of processing what's going on. So on the next slide, as we kind of wind down, I'd like to talk a little bit about managing stress at Christmas time. So this first slide shows a flower breathing. And so if you look at that closely, if you had this in front of you, you would slowly trace around 2 petals and breathe in, so, and then breathe out as you trace around 2 more petals. And breathe in around 2 more petals, and breathe out around 2 more petals. So that's one breathing activity. The next slide shows a racetrack, which is great for little boys. Starting at the starting line, and you breathe in as you go around the first curve, and then you breathe out as you go down the stretch and all the way down. And then the leaf breathing, where you breathe in as you go up to the top of the leaf, and you breathe down slowly as you trace the leaf. And then one of my favorites is star breathing. Again, if you Google star breathing, you can get this for, it comes up pretty quickly. But STAR stands for smile, take a deep breath for the T, and relax, AR. And so the idea is, I put googly eyes on my star and glitter. So kids love to make these. So the idea is that you start at the tip of the star, you breathe in, and then you breathe out. You get to the point of the star, you breathe in, and you breathe out. So I want to be able to impress the importance of breathing, because especially this time of year with everything everyone's on a hustle and bustle for Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. And anything that you can do, if you're in a restaurant and you're stressed, draw one of those little stars on the napkin and breathe from point to point, in and out, if you have a child that you want to help you with them. So kind of in closing, what I'd like to do, I put together this cute little anti-stress kit. And so I would like for Dr. Welch to pick something out of the kit. You have your hands full with Kathy Chatty and
I do. Yes.
These are just some ideas of what you can do for managing stress this time of year.
So it says focus on what you smell.
A very mindful kind of thing to do. Focusing on smell, focusing on there's so many wonderful smells this time of year between gingerbread and peppermint, and so when you focus on what you're smelling, it keeps you from focusing on other negative things.
Mm-hmm. It's called mindfulness, isn't it?
It's called mindfulness, yes.
This one I saw, and I thought this was creative as well.
It's actually from my Christmas tree, and I'm not lying.
Great. Yes. Reminds me of my daughter. She's a musician.
Ah, yes.
So create and play your favorite playlist songs.
Yeah.
So it causes me to focus on my daughter playing the piano, and I'm just relaxing as I listen to her.
Nice. That's nice. Well, I think I love Christmas time. I love this time of year, and I've had Christmas music on since like the day before Thanksgiving, and having a playlist of Christmas songs, or having your radio on Christmas. It's really hard to stay depressed when you're listening and singing with Christmas music. How many more do we have time for?
Let's see. Oh, this one was fun.
Oh yeah, that's a fun
I remember
one.
this one. You can see it's kind of a spongy, and it actually says throw at source of stress. So it won't hurt them if you throw it. So I guess that's what that is. I guess if you put a little water in it, it might not feel as good.
Yeah.
But that would be a clever way to change it a little bit.
Yeah, that would pull a punch there, wouldn't it? I'm going to do this one.
Okay.
This is, well, here, you do it, and I'll talk
Okay.
about it.
Yes. So this says, imagine your happy place. Almost the sun is shining and the music is playing.
Yeah.
Okay.
My happy place is definitely involving wearing a lei at a beach or Hawaii or somewhere where you're. And so when you're stressed, I actually do this in mindfulness practice with my clients. When they're stressed, literally having a place where they can go, a safe place, a happy place. It sounds kind of funny to call it a safe place, but.
Okay.
So are you feeling less stressed now, Dr.
I'm feeling
Welch?
less stress. I'm kind of in my happy place.
Good.
here,
You're in
yes.
your happy place with my Chetty Cathy.
Yes.
I have to pull out just a couple of more, just because I put these together, and I just thought this was very clever. So, the slinky, okay. Just because it's just a fun toy to play with. I have a.
Well, we're having a lot of fun, aren't we?
We
here
are
tonight?
indeed, indeed,
Okay.
indeed. Bean bags. These little bean bags I actually use with clients, and I recommend these to families that are dealing with challenges in regulating emotion. And so I let out my frustration by punching a pillow or tossing a bean bag. So it's not harmful, and it's amazing how children are able to let out their emotions, let out their anger by throwing a bean bag. So if you're in traffic, I recommend it. How many? Here's my marker I was talking about earlier. It has a little paint tip on the end of it. That's what the painting had been done with. Any more you want to pull up? Do we have time for one or two more?
Yeah, let's see. What else do you have in there? Oh, so this one says,
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
okay, thinking positive will reduce my stress. I can make a list of positive thoughts. Number 2, I can help myself feel better by thinking of a happy memory. So it's actually a brain, isn't it?
It is a
Okay,
brain.
okay.
It's a brain. Yeah.
All right.
And this one might be a good one to end with. It's a little 1970s coin purse.
Oh, you made me
Want to read that one?
Yeah, give something to someone else, time, volunteer, etc.
So, or money. That's always works too. But yeah, giving something away, because in having gratitude for things and thinking of things you're thankful for, and actually stating what you're grateful for, not only about yourself but to other people. So those are all some anti-stress things that I hope that you will be able to use in your families over Christmas. And so I did want to share this picture. This is my precious little dog, Gigi, and she is one thing in our family that keeps us from having stress, because she's the bane of our existence. So,
Thank you. Would you join me in thanking Dr. Terry Davis? All right, I'm having more fun than you are out in the audience, so I can tell that. And we are going to shift gears and go right into some questions that you have. If you have a question, please write it on your 3x5 card, raise it in the air. One of our first questions is a great question about having maybe grandchildren in a different place. So the question that we have here, if you do have a question, please raise it in the air, and we will pick those up and bring them to the front. Our grandchildren are 13 and 16 and live out of state. Do you have some suggestions for playing long distance? What a great question.
what a great question that
so
is,
many people
playing
are-
long distance. That's a great question. You know, I'm thinking about some of the. I don't know if you guys, the persons who've asked this question, if you do FaceTime or something where you have a video where you can actually see them. That's something that comes to mind, being able to talk with them. You probably may do that already. I know that there are some online games, video games, that you can, I'd have to look at my notes somewhere else to see what those would be, but you could probably, again, Google that. Find things that you would be playing at the same time as they're playing. So something like that, I need to give that some more thought.
Yeah, wouldn't it help also if you would, as you talk with them, as you talk with your grandchildren, is to ask them if there anything in the past of which they remember as being fun, or as you mentioned, Dr. Davis, what's one of the most favorite memories where we were laughing and giggling, And oftentimes that'll come up really quickly, and you'll hear them talk about it. In fact, that's a great thing to do in creating levity and fun and enjoyment in a family, is to try to remember back. My son, we always do at Thanksgiving time. I know we're talking Christmas, but we were at Thanksgiving, and I always read Abraham Lincoln's first statement about Thanksgiving in the United States of America. We had some challenges in our kind of a loss in our family, and so we didn't read it this year, but we always joke about it. He said, I told my friends, you know what my dad does? He's off to college, my son. He always reads this Abraham Lincoln, and they really thought I was odd and weird, but I'm sure they laughed about it, even making fun of me. But we didn't happen to read it this year, but it's a good memory maker.
It's a tradition you've had in your family of doing that
We've
every
had
year.
We've done that every
That's
year.
special.
So as we think about this idea of play, and it looks like I'm the play therapist right here. I actually do have a Santray. I work with lots of children. And one thing is, we have mostly adults, of course, here in the audience, and those maybe listening in. I know that children, not only children, but adults love to play. For years at a university in the Midwest, I led a freshman orientation program. We had about 6 sections for all of the freshmen, and we would bring in Play-Doh, and they would create something out of Play-Doh, and that was the most special moment during their entire semester, is when they created something out of Play-Doh, because they could show oh, you're ready for me to start doing Play-Doh as well, okay? They would create something very special, and they were using their hands. If you remember with Play-Doh, excuse me, I'm going to put this down. You use your hands, and then you use your creativity. No one else is creating it but you. Well, Dr. Davis, you may have to, as the teacher,
Well, let me help you open this.
take this off. I'm not sure this top is coming off. But with Play-Doh, you're using your hands. Anything you can do to use your hands, kind of a tactile. Anything you can do to share it with someone, that's sharing emotion, empathy with another person. Actually, we have less of that than we should have, because when we're texting someone, we're missing actually approximately 65 to 80% of the communication is not happening, and we're not creating wellness with a lot of texting and social media, because we're not seeing the person. Looking into someone's eyes changes the hormonal structure of the person. So these games that you're talking about, this is a fabulous presentation from me as a therapist listening in, because it gives great ideas how to even interact with your marriage. One of the things that my wife Robin and I do is we have playful things, maybe something that was scary or terrifying in the past, and we try to create some humor around it. And that humor we can reenact, and it lessens the trauma from the past or the pain that one may have experienced. So what are your thoughts about that when we look at play for adults? Because it's so important. When you were talking about Rogerian Carl Rogers, his suggestion is when you're really listening to a person, you called it person-centered, and the idea is that you need to be who you are. If you could only be who you are, that would be the greatest thing on the planet, just to be yourself. So what are some ideas for adults in play?
The idea, when you mentioned Carl Rogers again, the idea of unconditional positive regard. That no matter, especially in a relationship, no matter what your mate is saying or doing, you have that unconditional positive regard for them, that you're appreciative of the person that God brought into your life, and that you're very appreciative and respectful and understanding of their strengths, because their strengths are probably not your strengths. And you know how God does, he brings people together that sometimes are polar opposites.
Yes. If you notice, even in the New Testament, when we're talking about play, that Jesus oftentimes had the person think through their life situation and think through it. He would ask provoking questions, almost playful questions like, well, what would you like for me to do for you? What is this like for you? He would ask open-ended questions so that the other person would create what's going on with them. Because you talked about play helps to unlock the unconscious.
Yes.
And that's what Sigmund Freud did when you were mentioning the first person who really, in the scientific field, developed what we know as play therapy. It's trying to find a place in which that person can express what they normally wouldn't with words. If you think of Play-Doh, where's the Play-Doh? Oh,
Here it
yeah.
is, I opened it
You know,
for
when
you.
you have, thank you very much. The
And there's
Play-Doh.
when I was opening it,
Yeah.
it just gives you such a sense. When's the last time anybody played with Play-Doh? Today.
Today,
Good for
someone
you.
did good. Good.
And how did you feel after you did that?
Yes.
She said it was fun. Just the sensory feeling of that.
Yes,
just
you can
makes
make a new mustache. Mine would look better with this. There you go. Okay, you can do that. You can have fun. So if you have something just to have in your hands, usually when we're doing something in our hands, we talk better. Do we not? We actually talk when we're doing better. A lot of times people do that. You're talking about or referring to mindfulness. It's one of the first steps for reducing anxiety is mindfulness. And you referred to it several times tonight, Dr. Davis. Can you help us with a little bit of mindfulness?
Yes.
So when I'm making my mustache here and having fun and you're laughing, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking about my anxiety, or am I just kind of enjoying the moment of making a new mustache?
You are in the present moment. You
I'm
are
in the
not
present-
thinking about what you have to do tomorrow or what you had to do yesterday or the traffic. You're only thinking about this present moment.
Yes,
And
which
so-
Jesus talked about in Philippians 4, 6, and 7, be anxious for nothing, but in everything in prayer with thanksgiving, prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And what he talks about how his peace is almost incomprehensible. It's way above a man and a woman's thinking, and then it guards your heart and mind in Christ Jesus.
And the peace that passes understanding will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. And it was almost like we planned this because I actually have a shield.
Oh, wonderful.
A shield. And I have something that talks about, these are some more props, not in the PowerPoint, but let me start with this one
Can
because...
you hold it up for you?
Sure.
Or
So,
can you
so
see?
the worried brain. So this is if you have if you or you have a child or you have your grandkids that are at a distance, or to talk to them about what are the things you're worried about. And so in the head of this person here, write down all the things you're worried about. Get them out. Write them on a piece of paper. Write them down, and then talk about how there's like a worry monster inside you that causes you to worry. And so what are some things you can say and do to that worry monster, that worry creature, to stop the worry? So I think on the back, let me see what my notes say on the back. So yeah, to boss back to those thoughts that are saying, and this gets more into, as you know, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
So identifying your thoughts and then being able to stop them, because we know our thoughts lie to us,
Yeah.
right?
One of the things you were illustrating when you even threw the beanbag that's on the floor here on the stage is that oftentimes people that use play, they regain control of what they feel as though is control. Because oftentimes people are anxious. I think what I'm doing is moving this. People are anxious because they are anticipating something rather than staying present. And when we are playing, we're actually present because we have to really use all of our senses. Or we can tend to.
Yeah, that's a lovely description of that. And so it really focuses your whole body into the present moment,
Yes.
and what you have to do and what you have to accomplish or what you have to build or create in clay or Play-Doh or put together.
Yeah, I remember playing with my own children. We were up in our daughter's, well, I was actually playing with her dolls, and we were playing dolls, and all of a sudden we heard our son, they're 18 months apart. And Daniel's younger, Savannah's the oldest. So we're playing and having a nice time playing with the dolls, very delicate. And then all of a sudden I heard this truck coming into the room, and it was actually Daniel. He was on his truck he's just a little guy, and he just ran over all of the dolls. And of course it just ruined the evening because Savannah's now crying and I'm trying to comfort her. But this idea of play, that was his play.
That was his
Her play was
play.
very different, but it was creative nonetheless.
Oh my goodness, what a great story. The other thing that comes to mind as I was talking about the worried brain, the shield, I really like visuals. I like visuals. I have adult clients that appreciate visuals, but
You mean to hold that up?
especially children.
They
yeah.
get it on camera.
So yeah, I'm moving it around. So yeah, the shield, and so something that you can protect yourself when something's coming at you. And I know there's a Bible verse, I've got it on the back there, that talks about our soul waits for the Lord, Psalm 33:20. He is our help and our shield. And so a shield offers protection during an attack. It also deflects worries that are coming at you, and so giving people this visual is, I think, helpful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, as we begin to wind down this evening and looking at play, I'd like to just focus just a moment. This one question was asked, and then if we could focus a little bit on how can couples in a relationship, how can they utilize more play when life is so serious for them? What are some things that you've suggested for your adults? I know you work with a lot of children. I also know that you work with a lot of adults as well over these years. What are some things that you would encourage a couple to do within their marriage to increase play? One, I think, is having a dog.
Yes.
We have a dog in our home, and we have a lot of playfulness throughout the evening with our dog, and they bring a lot of joy. Or we actually have a bird in our home, and I do a lot of whistling, and the bird whistles at me. I whistle at it. I can be in the other room, and it'll whistle. I've always had a bird my entire life. It's a parakeet. But we can have animals and those that are alive in our home. That's one way. What are some other ways, Dr. Davis, that we can create more of a playful atmosphere in a marriage?
I think purposefully going on a date and looking each other in the eye and coming up with ways that you appreciate each other, really saying to each other, I appreciate this about you. I actually did this in session last week and actually gave a homework assignment to kiss each other 5 times a day. I actually gave that assignment. And that's not, well, it could be play, right?
Well, actually, that's playful, and we know biologically that if someone kisses one's mate or touches them and carefully is loving them, that there are certain transmitters that are released into your system, vasopressin, you have oxytocin, you have GABA, you have all of these transmitters that are ignited at that point to develop health within your system. It brings homeostasis. So that kind of touch and kiss and care is really needed.
Yes. And something else that comes to mind is kind of to piggyback on what you said earlier, finding ways to laugh, finding ways to laugh at each other, finding things that are amusing in your home. Where we are often amused at our dog and what she does, but doing things, finding ways to joke with each other and to play with each other.
Yes. And even finding something that is odd about yourself. I have a number of those, so it's not too easy. I mean, not too hard, excuse me, to find them. And even tease yourself in front of your mate about those humorous things. When I was in college, I worked for a plastering contractor, and they started calling me, it was back in the day when you would have a handle, you'd have a name. They would have a name for your
the CB radio
CBO
days?
radio, thank you. And they called me Zeke Birdbeak because my nose was so pointed. They said you could open a can with your nose. So you can start teasing about things that maybe you feel uncomfortable. My nose is okay, I think, but it is kind of pointed. But you can make fun of your own self with your mate, and that can be even humorous. Not that hopefully your mate is not laughing at you, but with you, right? You hope that that's the case.
I also think maybe to bring this full circle is to really find a game that you like with your mate, like a board game or something. I think of, in my tradition, in my family, we had we played games during vacations. And so find a game that both of you enjoy, because it's in that game that you're doing all those things about relating to each other and laughing and building trust.
Yeah, I remember playing Uno with our children as they aged, and they loved games, but then they get to the teenage age, and then we were able to coerce them to continue to play Uno. And what would happen is my wife Robin and I would get giggling so much that they were just absolutely embarrassed. And we said, nope, it's not time to leave yet. We're still playing the game. But they would end up laughing at us because we were so odd and laughing with each other.
Oh.
But sometimes that can be fun when you're with your children, or, as you said, when they become high school or I guess even college, they don't want to talk too much. But
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, and I think, one thing is maybe turning off the TV a little more.
Yes.
And not letting that always the news and the news cycle and different shows. Being able to just have some quiet and turn on music, or have a time where you just have that space where you're talking with each other. And I think that's
Even at the end of, say you do watch a movie, or I Love Lucy's been our favorite. If we want to just laugh about some things, we used to do this with our children when it would end, when actually the movie would end, it always had a lively song. So I would get up. I'm not a dancer. I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene, and I never learned how to dance, and I can't dance today. But I would get up and start dancing with our kids. Finally, I remember the day that my son grew to an age, and he got so embarrassed, he said, I'm tired of this. And he walked upstairs, but we still had fun laughing. So even dancing at the end of a movie in your home, not in a theater or anywhere place. Well, this has been so much fun. Dr. Davis, you have brought us great information. This can be used for a lot of people to be able to watch in the future, since we are archiving this and it'll be available. We want to thank you for being here this evening and presenting.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you join me in thanking Dr. Terry Davis?
Thank you.
And On Play. Very, very helpful. Well, we are so glad that you are here this evening. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to be with us. We have a wonderful new year planned for My Therapist Says in our broadcast. We just, again, thank you for being here. Just to remind you that you can find these videotapes on Vimeo.com, at the Skyline Church website, also at the Center for Enriching Relationships here in San Diego. We will have them on our website. Topics from depression, eating disorders, anxiety, and then even play tonight, play therapy and how to create play in your marriage and in your home and with your children and grandchildren. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we will close for the evening. Thank you again for being here. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of play. If we don't believe in play, all we have to do is look at children. They are our greatest play therapy for adults, is to watch children. We giggle, we laugh. They're just so funny, and they'll say some of the funniest things, and they'll act in ways that are just incredibly spectacular. So if we want to laugh, we just need to be around children for sure, and you're the one who created every child. So we thank you for the privilege of play, and we thank you for the ability that we had this evening to talk about your great grace in our lives, and also the ability to play and laugh and enjoy the life you've given each of us. We give you praise this evening in Jesus' name. Amen. I trust you'll have a wonderful evening. Thank you for coming to My Therapist Says.